Before I share my story, let me ask you, what would you do if, in front of everyone you knew, the woman who married your son called you a parasite, only to have the truth walk in the door moments later? I thought I was gaining a daughter. I thought I was watching my family grow. But the day my daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of 200 guests, I realized I'd spent years making myself small for the sake of peace. This isn't just a story about pride or public shame. It's about the moment you decide to stand up for your own worth and the power of truth when it finally arrives. So settle in, because what happened next changed not just my family, but the way I see myself forever. The night my daughter-in-law called me a parasite in front of 200 guests, I realized I'd spent my whole life making sure everyone else felt at home, except myself. It started with a party. Not just any party, but the kind that takes months to plan, with guest lists and caterers and flower arrangements that cost more than my first car. My son, Michael, and his wife, Vanessa, were celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary. They'd rented out the grand ballroom at the country club, invited everyone from Michael's childhood friends to Vanessa's colleagues, and insisted I be there as the matriarch of the family. I'd spent weeks helping Vanessa with the details, choosing the menu, folding napkins, even hand-addressing the invitations. I wanted everything to be perfect for them, for Michael, for the family I'd worked so hard to keep together after my husband died. The night of the party, I put on my best dress, the one Michael always said made me look elegant. I did my hair, my makeup, and stood in front of the mirror, trying to see myself the way I used to, before the years of loss, before the loneliness, before the feeling that I was slowly fading into the background of my own life. When I arrived at the country club, the room was already buzzing. Waiters in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne, the band played soft jazz, and the air was thick with perfume and laughter. I found Michael near the bar, his face flushed with happiness. "Mom," he called, pulling me into a hug, "you look beautiful." I smiled, my heart swelling. "You look happy, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." He grinned, glancing over his shoulder. "Vanessa's around here somewhere. She's been running around all day, making sure everything's perfect." I nodded, scanning the room for her. Vanessa was always in motion, organizing, directing, making sure every detail was just right. She was beautiful, ambitious, the kind of woman who always seemed to know exactly what she wanted. I admired her, even as I sometimes felt like I was in her way. The party was a blur of hugs and handshakes, of old friends and new faces. I made my rounds, greeting family, catching up with neighbors, accepting compliments on the flowers, the food, the music. I tried to stay out of Vanessa's way, helping where I could, but mostly just watching as she moved through the room, her laughter ringing out like a bell. After dinner, Michael took the microphone, his voice booming over the speakers. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Vanessa and I are so grateful for your love and support. We couldn't have made it this far without our family, our friends, and especially my mother, who's been our rock since the beginning." The room erupted in applause. I felt my cheeks flush, my eyes fill with tears. I smiled at Michael, mouthing "I love you," as he handed the microphone to Vanessa. She stood in the center of the room, her dress shimmering in the light, her smile wide and bright. "I just want to say how grateful I am to be part of this family," she began, her voice ringing out across the room. "And I want to thank my mother-in-law for all her help with the party. She's always been so present in our lives." There was a ripple of laughter, but something in her tone made me uneasy. Vanessa's smile sharpened. "In fact, she's been so present, some people might say she's a little too comfortable in our home. Always around, always needing something, always, well, let's just say, always taking more than she gives." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. Vanessa's eyes glittered. Some people might even call that being a parasite. A few people gasped. Michael's face went white. Ruth, sitting at my table, reached for my hand, her grip fierce. I sat frozen, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I realized then that I'd spent my whole life making sure everyone else felt at home, except myself. The silence after Vanessa's words was deafening. I could feel every eye in the room on me, some wide with shock, others narrowed with curiosity, a few with pity. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to run out into the night and never look back. But I sat there, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap, refusing to let anyone see me break. Michael looked like he'd been slapped. He stared at Vanessa, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Ruth squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes blazing with anger. "Don't you dare cry," she whispered. "Not here, not in front of her." I nodded, swallowing hard, forcing myself to breathe. Vanessa handed the microphone back to the DJ, her smile never faltering. The music started up again, but the mood in the room had shifted. People whispered behind their hands, glancing at me, at Michael, at Vanessa. Some avoided my eyes, others offered tight, uncomfortable smiles. I excused myself, making my way to the restroom. I locked the door behind me, leaning against the cool tile, my heart pounding. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, searching for the woman I used to be, the woman who'd raised a son, built a home, survived loss and heartbreak and disappointment. I thought about all the times I'd helped Vanessa, babysitting their children, cooking meals when she was sick, cleaning their house before parties, lending money when they were starting out. I thought about the holidays I'd hosted, the gifts I'd given, the love I'd poured into their family. I wondered when I'd become a burden. I wondered when I'd stopped being enough. When I returned to the ballroom, Ruth was waiting for me by the door. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine." She hugged me, her arms warm and strong. "You don't have to take this, Anna. You don't have to let her treat you like this." I shook my head, my voice trembling. "I don't want to ruin Michael's night." Ruth's eyes flashed. She already did that. I spent the rest of the evening on the sidelines, watching as Vanessa held court in the center of the room, laughing and dancing, accepting compliments on the party. Michael drifted from group to group, his smile strained, his eyes never meeting mine. I tried to make small talk with the other guests, but the words felt hollow. I felt like a ghost, invisible in a room full of people I'd known for years. When the party finally ended, I slipped out quietly, thanking the staff, hugging Ruth, waving to Leela. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past, the ache in my chest growing with every mile. At home, I sat in the dark, staring at the family photos on the mantel. I thought about the years I'd spent building a life for Michael, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given. I thought about the woman I'd become, quiet, careful, always putting others first. I realized then that I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of shrinking myself to fit someone else's story. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and started making a list, not of things to do, but of things I wanted, things I deserved. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a heaviness in my chest. I replayed Vanessa's words over and over in my mind. Parasite, always taking, never giving. I wondered how long she'd felt that way, how long she'd been telling people I was a burden, how many times she'd smiled to my face while resenting me behind my back. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my list from the night before. At the top, I'd written, "Remember who you are." Below that, I'd started a new kind of to-do list. Take a walk in the park. Call Ruth. Read a book for pleasure. Make dinner just for me. Find out what makes me happy. It felt strange, almost rebellious to put myself first, but I was tired of waiting for someone else to notice me, to appreciate me, to make me feel seen. I called Ruth, who answered on the first ring. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, her voice gentle. I laughed, the sound brittle. "Not much, but I made a list." She smiled, I could hear it in her voice. "Good, what's on it?" I read her the items, feeling a little silly, but she just said, "It's about time, Anna. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Now it's your turn." I went for a walk in the park, letting the sun warm my face, the breeze tangle my hair. I watched children play, couples stroll hand in hand, old men play chess under the trees. I felt a pang of envy, but also a flicker of hope. Maybe I could find happiness again. Maybe I could build a life that was mine. When I got home, I found a message from Leela. Thinking of you. Let's do lunch soon. You deserve a treat. I smiled, feeling a little less alone. That afternoon, I got a call from Michael. His voice was tight, anxious. Mom, can we talk? I hesitated, my heart pounding. Of course, sweetheart, are you all right? He sighed. I'm sorry about last night. I didn't know Vanessa was going to say those things. I tried to talk to her, but she says I always take your side. I closed my eyes, the pain sharp and fresh. I don't want you to have to choose, Michael. I just want to be respected. He was quiet for a moment. I know. I'll talk to her again, I promise. That night I made dinner just for me, pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil, a glass of wine, a slice of cake I'd hidden in the back of the fridge. I ate at the table, a book open beside me, the house quiet and peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt content. But the peace didn't last. The next day, I got a call from Vanessa. Anna, I just wanted to clear the air. I didn't mean to embarrass you last night. I was just joking. You know how people are. I forced a smile, my voice calm. I know how people are, Vanessa. I just didn't expect it from you. She was silent for a moment. Well, I hope we can move past it, for Michael's sake. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. For Michael's sake. I hung up, my hands shaking. I realized then that I was done waiting for Vanessa to change. I was done shrinking myself to fit her world. It was time to take the microphone and tell my own story. The next week, I kept my distance from Michael and Vanessa. I focused on my own life, my walks in the park, my painting class, my evenings with Ruth and Leela. I started to feel stronger, more like myself, less like a shadow in someone else's home. But the wound Vanessa had opened still ached. I replayed her words in my mind, wondering how long she'd been telling people I was a burden, how many times she'd smiled to my face while resenting me behind my back. One afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store and ran into an old friend, Mrs. Jenkins. She hugged me, her eyes full of concern. I heard about the party, Anna. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that. I smiled, blinking back tears. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins, I'm all right. Some people just forget where they came from. She squeezed my hand. You're a good woman. Don't let anyone make you feel small. That evening, I got a call from Michael. His voice was tense, almost desperate. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come by the house? I hesitated, my heart pounding. Of course, sweetheart, I'll be there soon. When I arrived, the mansion was quiet, the lights low. Michael met me at the door, his face pale, his eyes red. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I didn't know what Vanessa was planning. She's been different lately. Distant, angry. I think she's jealous of how close we are. I hugged him, my heart aching. You don't have to apologize for her, Michael. You're my son. I'll always love you. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. I just want us to be a family again. As we sat in the living room, Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. I see you're here again, Anna, she said, her voice sharp. Didn't you get the message at the party? Michael stood, his voice trembling. Vanessa, that's enough. Mom is welcome here. This is her family, too. Vanessa glared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. You always take her side. You never stand up for me. I stood, my hands steady. I'm not here to fight, Vanessa. I just want to be part of my son's life. She laughed, the sound brittle. You're always taking, always needing, always making everything about you. I shook my head, my voice calm. I'm done taking, Vanessa. I'm done shrinking myself to fit your world. The next day, I got a call from Michael's lawyer. Mrs. Turner, this is Mr. Harris. I need to speak with you about a matter concerning your son's estate. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? My heart pounded. Of course, I'll be there. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars, the phone in my lap. I realized then that I was done waiting for Vanessa to change. I was done letting her write my story. It was time for the truth to walk in the door. The next morning, I dressed with care, nothing flashy, just a simple navy dress and my late husband's locket around my neck. I wanted to feel strong, to remember who I was before all the hurt and humiliation. Ruth insisted on coming with me, her presence a steady comfort as we drove to Mr. Harris's office. The waiting room was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Mr. Harris greeted us with a warm smile, ushering us into his office. He gestured for us to sit, then closed the door behind him. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Turner. I know things have been difficult lately." I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. "What's this about, Mr. Harris?" He cleared his throat, glancing at a thick folder on his desk. "Your son asked me to update his will and some other legal documents. But before we proceed, there's someone else who needs to be here." He pressed a button on his phone. A moment later, the door opened and a notary walked in, briefcase in hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I'm here to witness the signing of some important documents." I looked at Ruth, confusion and worry warring in my chest. Mr. Harris opened the folder, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. "Your son has decided to transfer partial ownership of the house to you, Mrs. Turner. He wants to make sure you always have a home, no matter what happens." I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. "But why?" He smiled gently. "He said you've always been there for him. He wants to make things right." Tears filled my eyes as I signed the papers, the notary watching, her pen poised. Ruth squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. When we left the office, the sun was shining, the air crisp and clear. I felt lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Ruth hugged me, her voice full of joy. "You did it, Anna. You stood up for yourself. You got the last word." I smiled, the truth settling in my heart. I got the last laugh, too. That evening, I went to Michael's house. Vanessa was there, her face tight, her eyes cold. "I heard you went to see the lawyer," she said, her voice sharp. I nodded, my voice calm. "Yes, Michael wanted to make sure I was taken care of. He wanted to make things right." She glared at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You think you've won, don't you?" I smiled, my heart steady. "I don't need to win, Vanessa. I just need to know I matter." She turned away, her shoulders stiff. Michael hugged me, his voice soft. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." I hugged him back, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. "Thank you, Michael, for remembering who you are." Word of the notary's visit spread quickly through the family. Some relatives called to congratulate me, others to ask questions, a few to gossip about the drama at Michael's mansion. I tried to be gracious, to answer questions, to keep the peace. But I also set boundaries, refusing to let anyone make me feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. Vanessa, however, was not ready to let it go. She started telling people I'd manipulated Michael, that I'd guilted him into giving me part of the house. She posted on social media, painting herself as the victim, gathering sympathy from people who didn't know the whole story. I refused to engage. I kept my head high, my boundaries firm, my heart open to the people who truly loved me. Michael, for his part, seemed lighter. He called more often, stopped by for dinner, even invited me to help with the garden at the mansion. We talked openly about the past, about the mistakes we'd both made, about the ways we wanted to move forward. One afternoon, as we planted roses together, he turned to me, his eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for letting Vanessa treat you that way, for not standing up for you sooner." I hugged him, my heart full. "We all make mistakes, Michael. What matters is that we learn from them." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart, always." Ruth and Leela became my lifelines. We met for coffee every week, sharing stories, offering advice, reminding each other that we were more than the worst thing that had ever happened to us. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the community center, found joy in helping others heal. I started writing again, journals, letters, stories for myself and for Emily. I wrote about forgiveness, about starting over, about the way love can survive even the deepest wounds. I wrote about the lessons I'd learned, about the hope I still carried in my heart. Vanessa's campaign eventually fizzled out. People saw through her act, realized the truth, and stopped listening. She grew quieter, more withdrawn, her power over Michael fading. She focused on her own life, her own ambitions, leaving me and Michael to rebuild our relationship in peace. As the months passed, the pain faded. The anger softened. The house felt like home again. Michael laughed more, played more, started to believe that life could be good again. I realized then that I was still here. I was still standing, and I was ready to begin again. As the seasons changed, so did I. The mansion, once a symbol of distance and exclusion, became a place of quiet reconciliation. Michael and I spent more time together, cooking Sunday dinners, tending the garden, sharing stories about his childhood and my own. We laughed about old memories, cried over the ones we'd lost, and slowly the wounds between us began to heal. Emily came home from college for the holidays, her presence a balm to my heart. She brought friends with her, filling the house with music and laughter, reminding me that family is not just about blood, but about the people who show up when you need them most. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Emily turned to me, her eyes shining. "Grandma, I'm glad you stood up for yourself. I'm glad you didn't let anyone push you out of your own life." I hugged her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. "Thank you, sweetheart. I did it for all of us." Ruth and Leela remained my anchors. We started a tradition of Friday night dinners, sometimes just the three of us, sometimes with Michael and Emily, sometimes with neighbors who had become like family. We shared recipes, swapped stories, and celebrated every small victory. I found new purpose in volunteering at the community center, helping children with their homework, teaching art classes, organizing food drives. I realized that giving back wasn't just about helping others. It was about healing myself, about finding joy in the act of service, about building a life that mattered. Vanessa eventually moved out of the mansion, her ambitions taking her to another city. She sent a brief note, wishing us well, asking for forgiveness. I wrote back, wishing her happiness, letting go of the anger that had weighed me down for so long. Michael met someone new, a kind, gentle woman who treated me with respect, who welcomed me into their lives, who understood the importance of family. I watched as Michael grew into the man I'd always hoped he'd become, strong, compassionate, willing to admit his mistakes and learn from them. As the years passed, the mansion became a place of celebration, of laughter, of love. We hosted birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, and quiet evenings by the fire. The house was filled with music, with the scent of fresh bread, with the sound of children's laughter. I realized then that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about honoring it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward with hope. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Michael joined me, his eyes soft. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for never giving up on me, for teaching me what it means to be strong." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Thank you, Michael, for coming back, for remembering who you are." We sat in silence, the world quiet around us, the future wide open. I was still here, I was still standing, and I was ready for whatever came next. Sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who test our strength the hardest. I never imagined my own son would shut me out of his new life, or that I'd have to fight for my place in the family I helped build. But life has a way of teaching us that our worth isn't measured by the doors we're allowed through, but by the love, dignity, and courage we carry with us, no matter where we go. If you've ever been left behind by someone you raised, or if you've ever had to start over after being pushed aside, I hope you know you're not alone. Healing isn't quick and it isn't easy. But with time, honesty, and a little bit of grace, it is possible. Sometimes the real strength is in letting go, not just of the people who hurt you, but of the guilt and shame you never deserved to carry. Would you have waited for your child to come back, or would you have found your own way forward? Have you ever had to choose between holding on and letting go? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who might need a little hope tonight. Thank you for listening and for being part of this family. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, even after the deepest heartbreak, you can still choose to begin again.